Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township for October 16th. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bob, if you'd like to open us up in prayer, please.
Shall we pray? Father God, we thank you for, again, this opportunity. We're thankful for the privilege once again to, again, live in a free country, live in a country that allows us to discuss the issues that confront our lives every day. We get to choose the people that make those decisions. In that light, Father, we pray that you would give them discernment, that you would give them wisdom, that you'd give them strength and courage, and that the words that they speak would be tempered with thoughtfulness. And Father, we just look forward to how you're going to work in their lives this evening. And we just thank you for your presence here. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, item 2, approval of the agenda.
Chairman, I've got a couple of things I would like to add to the agenda with the board's approval. I handed out a sheet that has them both on. One would be item 6B, and that's a request to approve the sale of a 1996 brush truck number 2. And the second item would be number 8G, and that's a request for the Township Board to authorize the Township Treasurer to transfer the CD investments from Morgan Stanley to UBS. So if we add those two, that's all I had to add.
Okay.
Second.
Motion seconded by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 3, consent agenda, agenda committee reports. A, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the minutes of the October 2nd, 2018 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, the committee recommends to the full board to accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the revenue, expense report, and balance sheet for the period ending September 30th, 2018.
So move.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. George, is everybody here that you need for your presentation? No. Okay, well, let's move on, and then we'll bring them up when they get here, okay? Okay, so item 5 is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. Come on up.
Good evening, Gene Stock. I wrote my address down this time, 8322 Twin Creek Circle. The last time I was up here, I think I said Brookwood. So my wife got a good laugh out of that one. I did want to comment and commend the board for your efforts to make Bedford Township a better place to live, especially in the past 2 years. We've made a lot of strides here, and things I think look good. Special recognition, I think, should go to 2 township employees, and those 2 employees are our supervisor, Paul Peroni, and also our deputy supervisor, Al Pryor, who I think under their leadership, they've really provided some great things to happen here. And I think Paul can even tell you, I had my doubts even about Al, recommending Al to, but I think it would have been a big mistake if we wouldn't have hired him. He's done a great job. And thank you guys for all you do. On a side note, I did drive down Jackman Road today between M151 and Ralk Road. How nice. Nice improvement. I'm sure the people there and the people on Douglas Road appreciate it too. And the only other thing I got to say is go blue.
Amen.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public?
Go Irish. 2842 Sanibel Lane, Dale Track. I just want to compliment the board on their efforts on continuing to move towards compliance on Public Act 152, essentially known as the state healthcare law. It's good to see that you guys are continuing that effort and moving those percentages towards compliance. I already know that the full-time board members are already at the compliance level, but it's good to see that the other numbers continue to move up. It's fiscally responsible, and it shows the community that you're making your efforts to, serve them well. So, thank you much.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments? Seeing none. 6 is staff reports. 6A, request to approve the bid proposal received from R&R Fire Truck Repair, Inc., in the amount of $254,607 for an advanced life support capable ambulance. Assistant Fire Chief Kurt Keene, thanks for
evening.
being here.
Thank you. As Chief Maskell sent to you guys earlier this week about the 2 bids that we received for that ambulance, he would like to go with the Lifeline bid, which was $9,949 less than the second bid from Horton Ambulance Emergency Vehicles. This request is in balance with what our projected vehicle replacement policy is up, and we have the funds to be able to pay for this vehicle. So he's looking for your approval.
Okay. Any questions from board members? Okay. Seeing none, I look for a motion.
I'd like to move that we accept the bid from R&R Fire Truck for $254,000, I'll do the 2,000. $254,607 for the 2019 Lifeline Type 1 ambulance with options specified.
Support.
Okay, motion supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion?
I like your number first.
Yeah, me too.
Mr. Steiner?
Just maybe a friendly amendment, just, I know the price is next to it, but maybe mention the R&R Fire Truck Repair. And also that it's, we're going to be using the funds from the equipment millage to be used for the purchase, which is consistent with the budget plan.
I did say R&R, but
Oh,
I'll
did
take
you?
your,
Okay.
take your friendly amendment
I must
for
have missed that part,
that
Okay.
other part.
but in the budget.
Paul, are you good with the friendly amendment?
Of course.
Okay. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. It's exciting to know that in the near future, with probably the next few years, we'll have a lot of nice new equipment that we can rely on, so it's,
And we
Cool.
greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I want to say I appreciate you keeping up the old equipment. It's been very, very, very nice. I mean, it looks brand new to me, so.
okay. 6B, the sale of the brush truck. Mr. Francis?
The board got some information from the fire chief. We, as a board, authorized back in July, I think, to try to sell that brush truck for around $15,000. It was a stab in the dark on what the price would be. We received an offer to buy it for $9,000, and we countered with 12, and they ended up splitting the difference to make it $10,500. So that is an offer that we have on the table tonight that the chief would like us to make some decision on, so they know what to do with the vehicle.
Yep. Questions? Mr. Frederick?
My view is to sell it for $10,500 and get it out of the shop and get the money in the bank to use it against other equipment.
You want to make that in a form of a
I'm going to
motion?
move that we accept the offer to sell the 1996 brush truck number 2 in the amount of $10,500 as is, where is.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion from board members?
Just, do we have where we're selling it to? No.
it's an email.
Mr. Keen, do you have any information on
I don't
that?
have that information, I apologize.
I found out the name of the company is T-Line, the letter
T-Line.
T-Line Emergency Vehicles.
Good,
It
thank
was in
you.
the
Okay,
email.
could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Frederick.
Aye.
Mr. Francis.
Aye.
Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Clement.
Aye.
Ms. Tinderary.
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni.
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 7A under old business, review of Appendix A of the policy manual for the fire department.
I'll take that one.
Mr. Goldsmith?
Thank you. Chief Massengill and I have met once, and we've had multiple telephone conversations regarding this. When I first started on this project after the last meeting, my thought was to keep it as an appendix, but as I worked through it, it was just too
Mr. Goldsmith,
cumbersome.
is your mic all the way forward?
It was just too cumbersome to do that. One of my pet peeves as an attorney is trying to read a document to discern what the law is and having to go back between two documents. And it just wasn't going to work, in my opinion. So what Chief Massengill and I are doing is to take the manual that applies to all of our firefighters, whether they're paid on call, whether they're full-time or volunteers, and have everything incorporated into one document so that when you turn to a section, it will address all the requirements that apply to the full department. Otherwise, there were too many inconsistencies. As an example, when it came to discipline in the manual that applies, and the manual that we have now states that it applies to all firefighters, including full-time, because we have some full-time firefighters on staff even before the new hires. So there was a stepped disciplinary procedure, but in the appendix, it was different. And that would only lead to confusion and argument, and if somebody needs to be disciplined, they would point to one document versus another document, and it just wouldn't work. And it would foster litigation. So, having said that, we're well on our way to having it completed. When he returns, Chief Massengill returns from his deployment to Florida, and I spoke with him today, and he sends his greetings. We're going to meet, make sure everything is good with him as the head of the department, and then we'll have it ready in advance for the board's review, in advance of the November 13th meeting, if that is acceptable to you, Mr. Supervisor, and the board.
I think that's fine with me. Any questions for Mr. Goldsmith about that? Okay, so moving on to 7B, update on Fire Station 1.
Chief Masco sent you guys an email describing the issues that we're having there and what has been done so far. Supervisor Peroni is aware of all the things that have been going on there, and we're just looking for direction from you guys, and if you have any questions concerning that building.
With the mold issue, we spoke with Tom Corvette, and they can do an assessment and test the fire station. These tests will run for anywhere from 500 to 1,200. The Monroe County Health Department does not do these. With mold, you want the proper protocol in place for cleaning. So if that's the next step this board wants to take, is having a professional go in there and look at the mold. You know, a few of the things that have been done in the meantime, waiting on insurance, TJ Roofing has been there to inspect the roof. Everything to him seems fine, and he went over it. Rawlings has looked at the AC. Everything's working properly. And Kevin Webb, Service Master with Webb Builders, did an infrared testing throughout and could not find where it was coming from. So at this point, we really don't know where the mold is coming from. We had to wait for the insurance, to accept it or deny it. They've denied it. Now we can, have somebody, a professional, come in and look at it. But my whole thing to, you guys have been, it's the plans for the building, you know what I mean? What are the plans for the building? I don't know where you guys are at with the Fire Advisory Board as far as what are the future plans with the building? Are you putting another story on it so they have sleeping quarters, because the last thing we want to do is go in there, stick a bunch of money, gut the whole thing, and you know what I'm saying?
Well, Chief Massingill is currently right now devising the strategic plan for the buildings of the township, and that plan has not been finalized yet.
Yep.
But that is still a work in progress. So to tell you exactly what his plan's going to be, I can't answer that right now.
Yeah, and that's what I say. I think the main thing we'd have to do is get a professional in there to see what's going on with the mold, and Ms. Tinderberry?
Do you have an estimation of the cost for this?
500 to 1,200, anywhere in that area. We can get quotes. I mean, that's about the cost.
$500 to $1,200,000.
No, $1,200.
$1,200.
Yeah. Unless anybody else has a better suggestion on which way to go. I know I've talked to Mr. Clements about, the whole process of this, the roof did collapse, and we looked at the insurance company when the roof collapsed. Why did it collapse? Was, it engineered where the AC unit was put? You know what I'm saying? Well, when we fixed it, we had it engineered. And the engineers told us exactly what to do. They did exactly what the engineers told them to do, and final inspection was done on that with our building department. So as far as going back on somebody of, hey, why is this issue happening? Nothing's happened to this building in however many years, and now we fix it, and, now we have this issue. That's something we'd have to talk with the engineers about, and I've talked to Barry about it. I told him, hey, we need to look into this. This is what's happened after we done the fix that you told us to do. Could it have been some, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, I think to follow up on that, my concern is that I agree that we've had a lot of people look at it with no definitive answer. I'm not sure I'm prepared yet to just throw my hands up in the air and put this on the back of the taxpayer. If there's a chance for $500 to $1,200 that we would get some insight as to where the mold's coming from, and that then may tell us why it started to happen and it's just revealed itself within the last year to 18 months. I feel like that's a small price to pay, and like I said, I'm just not comfortable saying, well, it is what it is, and
No, I don't think we should do that either.
$250,000 in repairs,
No, I think that's definitely the next step is to get a professional in there and find out where it's coming from, for sure. There's no doubt that the building has a lot of issues.
Yeah.
I mean, around the whole building,
there's brickwork.
The block out back has got a lot of water issues to it, the paint's falling, it's got some issues. Mr. Francis?
That's a complicated issue. I know at the Fire Advisory Board, we've talked several times on what should we do with that. We had a study done by Manick and Smith where they plotted out from all three stations, how far can they get in 6 minutes, and put it on a plot so you can see where they are. For 3 stations. We also had them do it for 2 stations. And we could cover the needs of the township with 2 stations. Problem is, the second station isn't in the proper place to do that, which means you got to build a new one, which is probably $1 million to $1.5 million. That's a lot of money. We've talked then, well, gee, can we do a heavy remodel job on the temperate station and turn that into a 3rd station, a modern one, if you will? Probably be a lot of money, but it'd be a lot cheaper than building a new building from scratch. So there's a lot of items and issues and alternatives that we're working on, but I think that's the progress we need to take is we don't want to put a lot of money in that station if we're not going to use it. Probably nobody would buy it unless you happen to hit somebody that would want a service bay of some sort. But it's a lot involved in that decision, but
Yeah.
we're working on it.
Yeah, I agree. The first step needs to be done is the mold. Find out
agree.
where it's coming from. Mr. Steiner?
Well, that's just it, too. I was going to say, as Mr. Clement stated, that's the big thing. Get in there and find the real problem, because we can't make any decisions to spend anything additional, whether it's repair, whether, you had to rebuild, whatever it is. We can't do that until we know that answer, especially if it's a repair job. You could be repairing and just covering up, put a new coat of paint on it, and you're covered up the same problem that's going to come back. So I think it's the right thing to do, the between $500 and $1,200 to move this forward. Have you already started moving some of the stuff out, I think?
No, all the stuff is still in there.
Okay.
We're waiting for direction to start to have the room cleaned up. The carpet, the flooring, and the furniture that's in the building, it's all still in there.
Okay, and because of the mold issue, what type of equipment needs to be warned for the cleanup to remove? So that's another thing we need to look at too, is if we have to have somebody specialized because of the mold and type, that might add a little bit additional cost, not just sending just anybody in with a simple mask in to pull this out.
No, I think the board, we should probably get some quotes, you know, somebody to go in there and find out exactly what's going on before you guys do any cleanup, and then we'll have some direction after that. Mr. Frederick?
Well, there's two issues here. One is the mold issue, which you have identified. And so you're having someone come in and try to identify the mold. But we have a more fundamental question of how's it getting in there? What's the structural issue that's there? I read the comments from the chief, and he says maybe we need a structural engineer. I thought we did that once before I got here. I thought this board approved, or at least looked at, some engineering responses from Manick and Smith, and that the board voted on something. I've looked at the minutes, and I wasn't quite sure what the board voted on, other than they voted to do some structural work. Now, we also know that there was some temporary immediate work done, and whatever that was is done. It's gone. But there's been 2 or 3 different views on the structural side of things. Manick and Smith said, here's what you ought to do, and then somehow we said, well, we don't want to spend that much money, what's some lesser deal? In hindsight, maybe we should have picked the first program to begin with, but we don't know that. But there's 2 issues here, and one is the mold issue, and clearly all of the furniture and all that stuff probably ought to just be thrown away, and that way you solve one of the problems. But the structural issue is something separate. And so there has to be some thought process or some process put in place to determine what structural issue is the problem letting all of this moisture come into the facility. I listened intently to Paul Francis, what he said. Yes, those are what we've been studying. What are we going to do with this building? What are we going to do with that building? The chief has been charged with putting together a strategic plan, but in the interim, that building is still a fire station, and it should be in reasonably good condition so that we're not putting our firemen and fire ladies too in harm's way if they're going in there. So you've got something for $500 to $1,200 to do the mold work. I think there has to be some other thoughts on what are the structural issues that need to be looked at so that we can make a more informed decision.
My only additional comment is I'm real big on bids, and I'm real big on open process. When you look at the calendar, I'm also a little concerned about how that process lays out, and you look at our meeting schedule. I mean, we're talking about potentially Thanksgiving before you would have a firm actually in there and doing the work, and that seems troubling to me. On an expenditure of $500 to $1,200, I come back to it's an asset of the township, it's an asset of our people. I think it's probably a prudent decision to go ahead and retain this firm, have them test the mold. From that, hopefully we'll be able to glean some direction on where or what type of mold that is. That will point us to whether it's a structural issue. But at the same time, I feel like this is also a basic safety protocol we should have for our own firefighters that may be in there cleaning the room. Let's at least know what we're dealing with inside before we just launch in and do any more to the building.
Yeah, I've told the firefighters to stay out of the office area until we figure out what exactly it is. I mean, they're using the bays and stuff like that, but as far as the office space, they've been,
As
told to stay
Mr.
out of it.
Clements also pointed out too, if we put this at a bid at this point, this could push to Thanksgiving. Now we're getting into freezing temperatures. Now if you start to freeze and thaw, you can have upheaval in the facility if you add moisture in. So we need to move on this.
No, I agree. So are you talking about this Tom Corvette?
He's actually with Civil and Environmental Consultants.
Okay, so we can,
And I can say that, talking to Al today, there are only 3 companies that he could find, including this one being the third, that actually do mold testing, and they were all in the same price range.
So, we'll do that. We'll get somebody out there right away and keep moving forward.
TC's motion, I'll second it if that was TC's motion.
Yes, I would make a motion that we accept this company with a maximum of $1,200 to come out and test as quickly as possible, bring the resorts back to the board so we can take further action.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Any comments, discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. You are finally done.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The chief is watching right now, so you didn't vote no, so that was a good thing, so.
Is it possible to get an update on the deployment, or is that top secret?
I have no comment
Okay.
on that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, we have an engineer. What has Manick and Smith said, if anything, about the building, or something? I mean, we have them, what are they telling us?
Well, Manick and Smith's structural study was just for the room where the roof collapsed.
Okay.
Nothing other than that. But there's
That's what I
more
couldn't
to that
understand when I read
problem
the
than
minutes.
just
I
that
didn't know
room.
what they were telling us.
Pardon me?
Okay. When I read the minutes, I wasn't quite sure.
When I told him the situation we're in, what's going on, he was baffled by it.
Oh,
You know
okay.
what I mean, just as much as we all are. Okay,
Presenter is here. I don't know if
okay.
he wants to-
Okay, would you guys like to come on up now for the presentation on Senate Bill 637, the elimination of cable franchise fees?
Thanks for having us. Thanks for delaying it. Folks had a long ride. First of all, I want to talk about Senate Bill 637 because of 2 important things. One is the loss of the government channel, which is a possibility under this. The other is the loss of franchise fees, which is a significant amount to the township. That's a lot of money to give up. I have with me 3 people. Deborah Guthrie, she is the president of the Michigan NATOA. We have Millward Boudry, who you might know. He's the vice president of the ACM for us here. And finally, Michael Watsa, who is Protect General Counsel. He has been working for local governments regarding cable contracts and that type of thing. And he can certainly answer questions better than I can about this bill. One other thing I want to mention, I want to thank the Communication Committee for presenting to the board that we joined the ACM. I also want to thank the board for the foresight for approving us joining the ACM. The reason why, if we weren't members of the ACM, we wouldn't even know this was happening. That's how we found out. So, and sorry about all the meals. Okay, Mike, would you please come up?
Good evening. Thank you for indulging us a little bit of extra time, at least getting here.
Could I
So-
get your name again, Mike?
Mike Watza, W-A-T-Z-A. My office is in Detroit, 1 Woodward, Detroit, 48226. So I've been representing local government my whole career, 30-some years, and I've been doing this regulatory telecommunications, some energy work and so on for the last 20. I started representing Protect, which was formed 23 years ago by Dearborn, Livonia, and Southfield. MML is our fiscal agent, and we work very much hand in glove with them and the MTA on issues affecting the right-of-way. So the reason I'm here tonight is to tell you and share with you as much information as you care to handle. I even have some handouts if you want them. There are 2 immediate threats, and they are fairly recent. In 2014, the FCC started talking in an order that was issued. It's a couple hundred pages long. These things come in large volumes. And it talked about small cells. And it talked about how the industry wanted to go from the big towers out in Farmer Brown's field that we're all familiar with for the cell industry, and when they wanted to get down closer to the customer. They deferred talking about getting in the right-of-way at that time. Now dial forward, and so last month, August 3rd actually, they issued their first order on this issue saying that we're going to step in and deal with right-of-way, and we're going to allow these small cells, quote-unquote, in the right-of-way. And we're going to issue an order that clears the way from any kind of moratoria. That was the low-hanging fruit in their opinion. And one of the things they took a shot at, which is sort of interesting, because they actually named Michigan, which made me very popular with my colleagues around the country. We have this frost-freeze rule. You're all familiar? In the spring, we don't drive heavy trucks on our roads so that we don't have gravel roads. And they took a shot at that. And the reason they took a shot at it is because that's one of the industry complaints. Well, we can't drive our trucks and build broadband for all the people who need it because of this frost-freeze rule. And so the FCC said, well, that sounds like a de facto moratoria. And essentially ruled that that law, which has been around since 1949, may be in jeopardy. So that's a problem, and it underscores what's going on here, where the FCC and our legislature with 637, which we'll talk about in a moment, is bending over backward for the industry on everything that they're asking for. So then on September 26th, the FCC continued that order, the moratoria order, and issued a broad rule that allows the industry in the right-of-way for essentially free, very much unregulated. That follows the language in many respects because the same people wrote it for them at AT&T, as it wrote 637, which has been pending in the Michigan legislature for a year. And that law also essentially pushes you and I out of our right-of-way, allows the industry to be there for an amount of money, $20 per pole per year, which is 1% of the national average in the states, particularly that have not passed this kind of legislation. And then with very little regulatory authority on a very short leash. So you'll have 60 days. In 60 days, I can tell you that a lot of the phone calls I get from communities like Bedford that have a lot of other things to take care of, I typically get a call 30 to 60 days into the application timeline before they even realize they have an issue to be considered. And if you don't consider it within that 60 days, it may be deemed approved. So it's a real tough situation for all of you. And so if you don't mind cell towers on your right-of-way down Main Street or out in front of your yard, here's the other shoe that the FCC dropped. On September 25th, the day before the hearing where they issued that other right-of-way order, they, not in a public hearing, but just as a document that was passed around among the commissioners, 3-1, they adopted a proposed rule that allows the playing field to be dropped even lower, but this time for cable. You see, so cable and telecom, they're doing pretty much the same thing. It's all IP based, right? It used to be just video over here and phone over here, but now it's all kind of very similar, so very similar services. And so the law, not surprisingly, says you can't treat similar providers differently. Well, we have a situation where for 40 years we've been assessing and receiving franchise fees from cable to the tune of, right now, about $3 billion nationally every year. And that's a fee that they pay to be in our right-of-way, to make the money that they make, and it's worked for 40 years. Telecom, meanwhile, primarily AT&T, has been chipping away and saying, well, we don't want to pay those kind of fees, even if we're providing video and so on. We only want to pay a little bit. So in Michigan, if SB 637 were to pass, or if the FCC rules prevail against our appeal, which would preempt 637, frankly, which makes 637 irrelevant, AT&T is going to pay a pittance, maybe 10% of what cable's paying right now for access to the same right-of-way. And cable's always complied with all of our rules about where you hang things and how you do it and so on and so forth. AT&T wants a free pass, essentially.
Real quick, back on what you had mentioned, right here.
Yeah, sorry.
The franchise fee.
Yes.
Okay, that we accept, does that mean other cable companies can't come here because they pay a franchise fee? And I know the answer, that it doesn't mean that, but a lot of people think that because they pay the franchise fee, other cable companies can't come here to try to do business here.
No, in 1985, the law was, 85 or 96, the law was changed so that we could not issue exclusive agreements.
Okay.
The problem is that, if you've got Comcast or whoever already in town and they've incurred all the cost of building that system up, and now WOW, for instance, is doing some overbuild in various places. It's very hard to compete because you've got somebody already there. They got the customers, they got the revenue. So that's been that issue. Does that help?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear.
So the FCC, again, so there's been a deal made. That's the telecom and cable have always been somewhat competitive and unpleasant maybe with each other. Well, now they've made a deal. They have figured out that in the current dereg world that it dominates Washington today, that they think they can go for all of it. And so telecom and AT&T are going after your right away, as I described, for $20 a year when other communities are getting $2,000 per pole per year. And cable said, well, we want the same deal. And so they've got it. And in SB 637, they actually get a free pass for their microcells, Wi-Fi hanging on their current cable lines. You don't even get to know that they're doing it, let alone reviewing it, engineering it, and then approving or denying it. So that's 637. Under the Federal Cable Act, under the FCC rule that will be issued in the next month or two, the plan is to really put you to an impossible situation where they're going to now allow cable to deduct from your franchise fee all of the costs associated with providing you cable service. Now, they've done that already to some extent, but it was very limited. This is a complete departure from 40 years of history. And they're going to allow the cable company, as the proposed order is currently written, to deduct the value of the channel, for instance, just one of the items, but the big one, of your PEG channel. PEG channels are no different than any other channel. In fact, usually they're pretty low on the dial, so they actually have some value. Congress thinks that they have value for local programming. Cable companies just look at those channels and say, well, we're not making any money on that. Like, I can sell that channel to ESPN and make $1 million. And so they're going to be able to deduct that value. And the FCC has left it to cable to decide, is that going to be a cost-based fee deduction, or is that going to be a market value? If it's market value, we're going to see some really big numbers. And the way this plays out is the FCC will issue this order in the next, I said 60 days, probably more like 120 days. There'll be some objections filed, and we're in the process. I'm co-counsel with a firm in D.C. that is filing objections to all of this at the FCC. But long about June of 2019, and I don't know if you're on an annual budget or are you on a June 1st?
June 30.
July.
Well, long about June, when you're due to get your second quarter payment from your cable provider, you're going to find out just what this means, as is our best guess. And it could mean that you get nothing because they've deducted the value of the channel, and I don't even know how many channels you happen to have, but they deduct that value. I think it's $300,000 goes away. The worst case scenario is that the cable industry decides to be retroactive, which there may be an argument about. Well, there are arguments about all this, but they may do that. They can go back, arguably, under the Michigan Video Service Act, go back 3 years. So instead of a check, you get a bill, which sounds ludicrous, but I told you about how they wanted to strike down our 1949 frost-freeze rule, which, by the way, the federal government requires in order to get federal highway dollars. You have to do that. So one of the things we asked the FCC, for instance, in our response to that document was, did you check with the Department of Transportation before you said this? And clearly they didn't. So that's the problem, or problems. We've got SB 637 in the legislature. The group that I have served for almost 20 years Protec is the sole defender of your right-of-way on this issue now. MML and MTA were convinced to go neutral, which obviously I don't agree with. But since then, that happened in March, but since then, we have garnered 140 communities who we included in a letter to the Speaker of the House, who now sits on that bill. And it's the House Assembly that is going to decide this in the next couple of months. And we said, notwithstanding MML and MTA being neutral, which the industry is using to say they're in favor of it, they're not. We're saying, hey, we've got 140 communities just today, and by tomorrow it'll be 150, who are saying no, somebody missed the boat on this. Because again, you lower the bar for the telecoms, the result is, inexorably, you lower the bar for cable. The telecom, the small cells in the right-of-way, that's tomorrow money.
So what you're saying is taxpayers won't see a reduction in their cable bills because they're just going to take that money and put it towards the cable channel that we're utilizing?
Well, no, cable's just going to take the money.
Okay, but they're going to charge us for using that station,
Yes.
is what you're saying?
Yes, they're going to reduce their cost by not paying you a franchise fee. That's the bottom line.
Don't we
Do you have a
some
question,
kind of-
Ms. Tamer?
Yeah, don't we have an ordinance that lays out this whole thing? I mean, does that just,
It's preempted by, it'll be preempted by the FCC. Sorry, it'll be preempted by the FCC order. What I am baffled, Mike, that the
Well, you're in good company.
that the MTA, you and I have had conversations at MTA conferences on this very issue and other issues, but I'm baffled that MTA, which we are a member of and we pay our dues, has taken a position of neutrality. I'm baffled by that.
You know, so the explanation, if Larry was standing here, he would tell you, well, the original draft presented by AT&T, that is, and AT&T, I have opposed AT&T many times before. They are very strong, well-financed, and they'll have 20 people in every room to me, or one or two others. It was awful. I mean, it was awful on a level that awful doesn't describe adequately. It was awful substantively, and it was written by a 3-year-old. It was terrible. You couldn't even understand it. And so, to their credit, I mean, we went ballistic, and MML and MTA said, okay, well, we're going to fight over this. And I don't know that they got necessarily the best advice. They didn't hire me. You might have guessed that. But they hired somebody else, and which is fine. But I don't think they didn't see the connection to the cable side, even though we've been warning about this for 20 years. You can't let one company in to do what they want to do for this for free, and then expect the other guy to just keep paying away. I think that was the part they missed, and you know, that's the way it is. So I don't have an answer for that either.
So our board knows who among our legislature is sponsoring SB 637?
Well, the original proponent was Senator Hune from Heartland area, up way up to actually up what 23. It came out of Senator the Senate Energy and Technology Committee, Senator Knopf's, who's from the Kalamazoo area. So nobody immediately in your area was sponsoring it, but it has carried through the Senate. It passed through the committee, it passed through the Senate, and then it got assigned to the House Energy Committee Chairman Gary Glenn, which is very interesting because Gary has cancer, and he was presiding over the smart meter issues, which there's that element in all of this, which is what are we doing with the RF, the radiation that comes from these things. And so Gary was very attuned to that, and so I think that the Speaker thought that might be a good place to put the bill, even though it was the Energy Committee. And so he took a long look at it. He took a lot of testimony from experts from around the country on that issue, and has a lot of concern about it, and he ended up voting against it at the hearing just a couple weeks ago. We had 4 others who voted with us or against the bill, but a predominant number of the members of the Energy Committee voted for it. And so now it's in front of the House, and the Speaker has it. And we have until December 31st to keep it down and not going forward. We're doing everything we can, but without MTA and MML support, we usually rely on them for their lobbyists. And so we don't have that. So we're trying to do what we're doing here, which is get around to all the communities and let you know, and hope that you will get out and speak to your state and federal representatives, because it's the federal congressmen and so on and the senators that will lean on the FCC, that part of it, along with our appeals in federal court. So,
Do you have a roadmap, should the board decide to do that, the language that they could use to voice opposition?
I love those questions, Phil. Yeah, I have a couple resolutions. One is very short. One is longer. I'll let you guess which one I wrote. There's a couple resolutions. There's my letter to the Speaker that lays out the issues fairly clearly, I think. There are resolutions and then letters. What else do we have?
Do you have copies for each
I
one of
do.
the board
I'm going to
members?
share all that with you.
Okay.
I'm going to leave these with you, in fact. I would be remiss if I did not do one thing, because pictures are important. You're going to hear from AT&T, from Verizon, and other proponents of the bill, what Senator Hume said at one of the initial energy, or telecom energy meetings, if I may, just to show you. You don't have a screen. So you'll hear that the small cell that they want to do on your main street is the size of a pizza box. And so Joe held up that little box. That'd be great if that's what the legislation said.
You got to go back to the microphone.
But in fact, the legislation.
Here, pass it to Nancy. We'll pass it down because nobody at home can hear you.
The legislation actually says that they can erect 31 cubic foot worth of equipment. And then, so one of the assurances that we received from one of the entities that we talked about earlier is that, well, we capped the height at 40 feet. Well, except that the FCC has already ruled that once you approve one of these, that 30-foot utility pole out in front of the house now gets capped at 40 because that was the give. But the FCC says you get to go another 10 feet once you approve. So now it's 50 feet. And because there are 4 carriers and the FCC says you have to allow co-location once you approve, oh, and you can put 6-foot extenders on that 50-foot pole. That's in writing. FCC preempts everybody else, as Phil said. So now you got potentially a 50-foot pole with 4 utility-sized refrigerators, industrial refrigerators, sitting on that pole. That is not a pizza box. And so that's some of the problem with this whole debate is it's just, frankly, it's just so dishonest. In fact, if you flip through that document, you'll find the last page of that document, a facility out in Arizona that fits the dimensions that the bill actually talks about. And I invite you to take a gander at that and think about that on your right-of-way.
Board members, do we have any questions for him at this point? Because I think we'll just leave everything with Mr. Goldsmith. We'll kind of look at.
Yep.
I would like to hear from Gene Stock, actually, because he's very familiar with this thing
Come on
that
up.
has happened. He has a lot of background and knowledge in this.
Again, Gene Stock, 8322 Twin Creek Circle. Years ago, I was on the cable committee, and this was one of, and the thing I want to address is the franchise fee. I'm opposed to this other stuff you're talking about, but the franchise fee, I always have felt has been unfair to me as a Buckeye customer. I'm forced to pay this fee, which the township uses for other purposes, not back to cable customers. What about all of the people who have DirecTV, Dish, no cable? They don't pay a franchise fee. I think if this fee is so important, what we should be doing, we should be turning this over to the taxpayers and putting it up as a bond issue. If you really need, and it's up to $300,000. I don't think, I've been trying to tout this for 15 years now to people to wake them up that what this money is being used for is really at the discretion of the board. They can spend this money anywhere they want to. And I really think it's an unfair way that we pay money as Buckeye customers in particular. That's, Buckeye is who we have here. You know, I don't know what else I can say. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you have any answer to that question? I mean, is my bill going to stay the same if this franchise fee is eliminated? That's what I want to know.
I'll try and respond.
Okay.
Thank you. So the pass-through argument is made by the industry on a routine basis. And they argued for that in the 85-96 Act amendments in Congress, so that they could make the argument that you just heard, which is, well, you don't want to charge franchise fee, or you don't want to charge a PEG fee, because we're just going to pass that right onto the resident. It's like a tax. It's a cute argument, and I appreciate it, and I understand it, and you're not the only, I've heard it before. But the fact is, it's just one cost that the cable companies incur in the course of doing business, which is gaining customers in your community. It is rent for using the right-of-way. The alternative, frankly, would be to give them a free pass, which is what AT&T is asking for, which does what? It allows the cable industry or the telecom industry to use a taxpayer-supported right-of-way for essentially free, which means you are now underwriting, some would suggest, wildly profitable telecommunications industry that doesn't need the charity, and they're not a charity. So that's the problem. The other part is where we have seen around the country where a community says, we're not going to charge any more franchise fee, or we're not going to charge any more PEG fee. An amazing thing occurs. The charge to the customer does not go down. I mean, so just because they get to itemize it and make this a political issue, which was the point of that, you know, just think about it. Comcast CEO, I think, earns, I forget, $120 million a year. That's not on the bill either. Could be itemized, but they don't want to talk about that. So I appreciate the argument. I don't want to make light of it. It's important, but it is simply, you know, you're going to give it away to the for-profit entity and have the taxpayers shoulder that cost for free? I don't think so.
Ms.
I don't think
Tenneberry?
that's a good plan.
I appreciate Gene's comments because they're exact. He said it better than I could, and they're exactly what I was thinking. I'm a cable user, and I pay the franchise fee. They don't. I have to put that in when I believe it's a tax. Mr. Francis and I disagree, but I believe it's a tax on me because I have cable. I think we need to have our representatives come down and listen to their point of view of why they're encouraged by this. I don't think we can make a decision based on just the input that we've had tonight. I think we have to have more data and information because they're already getting it for free because I pay the franchise fee. They're not
Very
paying
good,
anything.
Nancy, very good.
So,
I guess the other question is, do other states have franchise fees?
Oh, sure.
All the states. Every state has a franchise fee.
It's federal law.
It's a federal law. Okay. But I still think it could be eliminated. Let them have the right of way. You know, unless the township wants to pay for it. You guys pay for it. Don't tax. I don't care if you want to call it a tax or not. And I'm not trying to be cute as a cute argument. It's factual information. Many of you remember years ago the argument we had when the schools shared in the franchise fee, and then at board's discretion, they took it away from them. And that's one of the reasons why some of those programs that the kids had went down the tubes. So I don't want to take any more time, but I really think I agree with Nancy, and I think the public needs to have a voice in this too, not just come to meetings. Have a meeting, you know, like you do, Paul, a town hall meeting on this. I'm sorry if I took up
Oh, you're
extra
okay.
time.
So let's do some homework on it. We have the information. We'll take a look at the drafts that you have, and we'll go from there.
And we'll get Zorn and.
Yeah, we'll call Zorn and have him come. I mean, it's a time-sensitive deal, so we need to, you know, move quickly on it, but I'll call him first thing in the morning.
They're all running for office, so I mean, before November 6th, I think we could get quite a few of them in here.
And both of our representatives voted for that bill.
They did.
That, Tim too?
Pardon me?
That Tim in
No, I'm talking
Washington? Oh,
Zorn
both?
and Shepherd.
Oh,
They
okay.
both voted for the state
Well,
bill.
I think we need Tim here too.
20 seconds.
Over.
I presented you with a problem. I want to make sure I present you with the solution. There is ProTech, which we would ask you to join. We have 93 members in the state of Michigan. Dearborn, Livonia, Southfield started it. There's a fee. It helps pay me to run around and do this kind of thing. There's also a group called Smart Communities, which is me and some colleagues in Washington, D.C., who are opposing everything that the FCC is trying to do here. That also comes with a fee. We desperately need the money because it costs money to
When do
fight
you
it.
need the resolution by?
Well, this legislation will die if it's not passed by December 31st. We think that the bill will come up for some action by the speaker sometime in November. You know, they're campaigning. They're not meeting as far as we can tell. It would be wonderful to get something from you in October.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, guys. Come on up. We do have to get moving, though. We have a lot left on the agenda.
Millward Boudry, Executive Director of Monroe Public Access Cable Television and Vice President of Michigan ACM. Last Friday, we had a fall station tour. As you know, your facility was part of the tour. And what happened was that we did meet with Representative Joe Bellino from Monroe, and I got a hold of him well in advance of the subcommittee meeting that they voted on this to move forward, to go out to the floor. And he did vote no on it. He was the second vote of the four that voted no. Dale Zorn was also available for lunch with us. He's aware of it. He is trying to get information so that he understands what it's all about. What he sees in Senate Bill 637 doesn't spell out everything that you just heard tonight, okay? So he's needing that information, and we're trying to get him.
But he supported it?
He
Frank said he's-
supported it originally back in, when was it first? Back in last year, I believe it was? A year ago. Yeah, a year ago. But there was no one knew about this, and he, you know, the verbiage in this bill was not clear, identifying what the ramifications are going to be if this thing passes. So he's been up to speed on it. He wants to write an amendment to protect the franchise fees and public access television from this bill, with this bill. So he's looking at that, and I believe Joe Bellino is willing to work on an amendment also. I think you need to bring Jason Shepard into this mix too, because he's your representative. I believe he supports it. There has been communication from our members from MPACT talking to him directly. So I think he's a little bit more educated on what's going on with this. So that's the information I wanted to bring you up to date at this point, that our representatives and senator
Thank you.
does know. Okay?
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys for being here tonight. We appreciate it. George, you all set? Good? Okay. Okay, item 7C, request for action on the yardway service agreement between Bedford Township and Mulch King LLC. Andrew, come on up. This is Andrew Nyes, the owner of Mulch King, Smith Road.
Andrew Nitz, 110 Smith Road.
Okay, so, Mr. Goldsmith, you wrote up a contract. Andrew, we've sent it over to you to take a look at it.
Yeah. There's only two minor issues that I saw with it. If we could, the hours will change just because we're running out of daylight every day. So I don't know if that needs to be in there or not for your purposes, but obviously we won't be there at 8 a.m. or 7 p.m. come November when it's dark. It's just too large of a 23 total acres, people get lost in there driving around trying to dump their leaves in the dark. So that was the one minor issue, and then the other one was on number 2, it says scope of contracted services. The wording on that first sentence, to me, seems like it implies not just the township, but all of Monroe County too. So I don't know if you could word that differently, because we're not, this is between Bedford Township residents and the Mulch King, not all of Monroe County.
I think that just says that it's the Bedford Township that's in Monroe County. There's
Yeah.
another Bedford Township, so we're talking.
Yeah, we are Monroe County.
We are Bedford
Right.
Township of
But
Monroe
I
County.
get what you're saying. It's-
You see what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
Like, if you read it fast enough, you could say,
So, yeah, Ms.
just
Hirschberger had a
put
good
in,
idea, so
you just
in.
add the
Monroe
word
County, yeah.
in front of it. I think other than that, everything looks great to me.
Mr. Frederick?
Mr. Goldsmith, rather in paragraph 1, rather than saying during the following hours of operation, can we just change following to posted hours of operation?
Sure.
And that way, that'll take care of your problem. So we can amend that, just say posted hours of operation, forget the rest of this. You'll have it posted at the gate anyhow, if I remember.
Right, and we'll have signs up with the hours, as well as it'll be on our website, Facebook page, so anybody can connect and see it.
And
through
just
all
to
that.
bring everybody up to speed out in the audience and at home, this is a contract between Mulch King, the newly formed compost station off Smith Road, right by Telegraph, to offer residents for the next 2 months free service to drop off your grass and your leaves. That way you have a place, because we're not having dumpsters. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, so just so you know.
Can we, Mr. Supervisor, I don't want the hours to be posted for 2 hours a day, so can we put a minimum time frame in there? During the posted hours of operation, so what would be the minimum hours of operation? that you-
10 to 5,
On Monday through Friday,
every day.
every day?
Yeah, we're there Saturday and Sunday as well.
Okay, so right now you're open from 8 to 7 p.m.,
Monday
correct?
through Friday, correct.
Okay, and when does that change?
I'm looking to do that at the end of this month. I think we'll still have enough daylight hours to get us through the end of the month. If we have to, maybe the third week of the month, we might have to change it.
Quick question on that. I know we've missed the last couple weeks, because you are charging people right now.
Correct.
So my thought would be, that this contract would be for the next 2 months, starting, tomorrow. And that would get us into.
That'd be 2
'cause a lot of
months.
people say, hey, burning season isn't long enough, we need more time, and that would give them an extra couple weeks anyways at the end of the season to still be able to drop.
Yeah, tomorrow would be
See what I'm saying?
59 days to December 1st, or December 15th. That'd be 59 days, so you get them a couple extra days out of it.
To December 15th.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and that's your...
That's what you have in there.
Yes, then, well,
Yeah.
your website said you're open until December
Yeah.
15th.
It's-
So,
If it's not covered in snow, we'll still stay open. People can still come, but being the facility that it is, it's 100% outdoors.
okay, so if I understand you correctly, you will be open every day a minimum of 7 hours, correct?
Well, maybe not Thanksgiving or Black Friday, but every other day, yeah.
Okay.
Andrew, what's your situation with the road commission at this point?
Right now, we're still under the guidance from them, or I guess restrictions from them, that the entrance has to be done by the end of the month.
Okay.
So
And you're on track to be able to do that?
on the track as well as we can. I can't, it's outdoors again, so if the weather prevents us from being able to pour asphalt,
Yeah,
I know
because
what
that's
I
one
can do.
thing we've talked about, with our contract here. If the road commission potentially shuts him down in 2 weeks because he wasn't able to get it done, now we're in another situation.
And we still have to get all those lines are low, so we still have to count on the utilities companies to all come over and move those, because where he's requiring the entrance to be is a really long stretch between those 2 telephone poles. So I could build it, but if I can walk through and hit the line with jumping up in the air, then obviously we can't risk having people going in and out of there either. So I don't know if they'll allow us to give us a little more time to get the utility companies out as well as the asphalt companies, so.
Mr. Frederick?
If the road commission or the utility workers don't get there in time, there's a provision in law that says force majeure. And so we can say you're open 7 hours a day, holidays accepted, provided that you're open, because if the road commission says you're closed, you're closed. So I think that, you know, if there's force majeure, that is something outside came in and closed you down that you didn't have a responsibility for, we can work that out.
As long as we are refunded on a pro rata basis for the time.
And you have that in there anyway.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
So-
I
Mr.
just
Steiner?
don't want the township to pay, the taxpayers to pay for a service that you can't, for whatever reason, provide.
Right.
I'm sure you understand that.
Yeah, I could get hit by a bus when I leave here, so it is what it is. And I'm totally fine with that.
Mr. Steiner? We hope not.
Mr. Goldsmith,
I hope not too, but.
went pretty much right where I was going to say, but also to remember that there was a site plan with this property and the driveway was not put in the right place, correct?
The driveway that's there was the existing one when we
But
purchased
but
the
it
land.
doesn't meet the site plan.
No, it's supposed to be closer to Telegraph Road.
Okay, so that's where I'm going to go. So I'm going to hold a little bit of a firm line that, in my opinion, that the hours of service, they must be posted very clearly. It's late by 8 o'clock. I think 9 o'clock should be the latest open time, and 5 o'clock should be fine.
Keep in mind,
But-
daylight savings time comes November 4th, so
That's why I said 9 o'clock, it'll be daylight, very easily.
5 o'clock it might not be.
And that's why I said close by 5 o'clock, because of daylight. So that's my opinion on those hours. I think we should be firm with it. As Mr. Goldsmith stated, it is in their provision. If it gets shut down due to not being able to put that entrance in, then the refund has to come back at that point. Again, the township did step out a long way with a lot of zoning adjustments, so I want to hold firm on that.
Mr. Francis?
Why not make it daylight hours and don't specify the exact time?
I think that's kind of what you're saying, though. You need to have something.
Yeah, it's just safety reasons. You can't. if
Because it's dark at 5 o'clock in the winter, or
Yeah, Mrs. Smith could be dumping her leaves and run Mr. Williams over on the way out. I can't have that liability if they're there and it's dark. And you know how many people are gonna come in there. The mountain of leaves from last year, you could have skied down it, so it'll be busy.
I just want the residents to know the hours of operation. If, you know, if somebody is, people work. And if they come home, if they get off at 3 and they come home and do their lawn and they expect it to be open until 5, then it should be open until 5 and not close at 4:45, because then they've got a load of leaves and they have no place to put it. I just want some certainty
Then they're gonna
for
call here.
terms of the contract.
That calling us then.
I would say make it a minimum then of what you had said originally. 7 hours a day, 10 to 5, and if we're open more than that, then.
I would think that's
greater
reasonable,
power
being
to 'em
open
if you
7
gotta
days
have
a
a
week.
specific time.
You know, I mean, you could go there Saturday, Sunday, and, you know, for the working person, you know, so.
That's the idea.
Ms. Stenneberry?
Why are we doing this just for 2 months? What's the long-range plan?
That's something we need to negotiate after this. We'll have to start figuring it out. I mean, if we want to do a year-long program with him, we'll, you know, are your plans after this? I mean, do you plan to not charge eventually, or was your, because that's one thing that I've thought to myself of, you know, you weren't going to charge this year, but, you know, you are because of the cost of the for your site, and I get that. But if next year your plan wasn't to charge, why are we contracting with you if you weren't going to charge anyway? So
I don't want to speculate on that, of what would be going forward, because we speculated on a lot of the costs when we came in and presented the site plan to begin with, and then those blew up way over what they should have been, because everybody was so worried about the whole idea of composting and nutrient runoff and everything. I didn't want to charge at all to begin with until we had gone $60,000, $70,000 over budget, because we had to revise the site plan 7 different times, not just because of everybody here, but the drain commission, soil erosion, the road commission, you know, all of that wasn't in the budget or in the plans to begin with. A regular site plan, buying the land and the equipment, everything, I budgeted all of that. So it wasn't my intention to ever have to do it, but now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, because the road commission says build this or get lost. So we have to try and get it done somehow. So to say, who knows what'll happen next year? You know, I can't answer that question for anybody.
So we just start now, and, I mean, I agree with Ms. Tinnery, we do have to have a plan for the future, and, you know, we're far out from spring, so I mean, it's, what we'll, Mr. Frederick?
Well, we should finish out this year.
Yeah.
And then between now and whenever, you know, January and February and March, probably not much activity there. You'll be doing whatever is necessary to comply with the site plan.
Right.
And I know the drain commissioner's going to be on you like crazy. The road commission's
every
already
month.
there.
Yeah, every month they've both been
You're going to
there.
have enough regulatory issues coming at you that January, February, March, you'll be dealing with all of those. And so sometime early next spring, you might be in a position to make a proposal to the township at that time. So let's get through the rest of this year. And we can talk about 7 hours, 5 hours, whatever. Clearly, we can say something out at 7 hours a day and you can't close before 5 or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
we can work all that out for the rest of the year. We've already agreed on to how much we're going to contribute to your operation. But then in February, March, or whenever, you can come back, work with the supervisor, and come up with a proposal for the board to consider.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion.
Well, before we do that, could we, Phil, have you got the language changed?
Yeah, I've got the language changed. Well, in paragraph 1, it will state, during the term of this agreement, the service provider, which is Mulch King, shall make its composting facility available to Bedford Township residents to accept clean yard waste during the posted hours of operation, not less than 7 hours per day. So,
Holidays accepted.
yeah, I'll put that in there. And I'll remove the reference to Monroe County. But that was, as Ms. Tinnery said, that was because there's more than one Bedford in the state of Michigan, we usually specify which Bedford we're referring to, so.
Or clarify that, Phil, with Monroe County, Michigan. I mean,
Are you planning to check IDs?
yeah, well, obviously.
Once you
after,
start, I mean,
right,
okay.
Yeah.
That's
was
provided
thinking-
for in the agreement, that
do
to
that
gain access, the residents have
Yeah.
to be prepared
It
to
says that.
provide a photo ID
Okay.
so that they can verify that it is in fact a Bedford Township resident. It's also in the agreement that this does not apply to commercial lawn services regardless of residency. This is for the individual residents of Bedford Township.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Is the board prepared to make a motion?
Yeah.
Ms. Tinnery?
I move that we approve the contract as presented regarding yard waste service agreement with, the Mulch King LLC between present date and December 15th.
Can we put the effective date will be October 17th?
Whatever you say, yes.
Thank you.
Second for discussion. I know you said as presented, but we
Okay,
did
as
have.
amended.
As amended.
Okay, just want to be clarified, and then Mr. Goldsmith got those amendments.
Yes, I have it. I'll make those first thing in the morning and transmit it to Nancy Jen so she can present it for signature to Mr. Supervisor and Madam Clerk. Should the board adopt this motion or pass the motion?
Any more discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Thank you, Andrew, for being here tonight, appreciate it. Item 7D, update on staffing model for assessing department. Alan Matlow, come on up. So the assessing department has been working on getting a report to the board, and they're just quite not there yet, so we thought we'd give a quick update on where we're at.
Since the last time I was here, we took all your input into consideration. We've had some very good input, some things that people would like to see. Some things were brought up that were not brought up that night of the meeting that we looked at, have looked at. We've had some positive feedback. Mr. Steiner here came in, spoke with me, and showed us a few things that we wouldn't or hadn't been looking at, looked at a little bit different way. Like I said, we're still working on it. We're close to bringing a couple models together for you to look at to get away from that Band-Aid approach and move forward and to do better than what we have been doing with what we've had. There's still some time. If you'd like to come in for a little more input from yourself, we're more than gladly, to hear from you. We should have something in the next 2 weeks. We'll be back, present it to you, and go forward from there.
Any questions for Mr. Matlow?
Questions?
Ms. Tinderberry?
I don't have a question, but I want to clarify something you said. I think you're doing a good job. You passed your AMAR. I mean, that's one key thing that I think is extremely important. So I think you have been doing a good job, but a good job can always have improvement, and so I'm thankful and pleased that you're working in that direction.
Thank you, Nancy.
Mr. Frederick?
I checked with our clerk about the telephone calls that you have per day. A lot of them.
Yes, we do.
And that really bites into the opportunity for you people to go into the field. Now, you're answering calls for everybody in the place. It seems to me that there has to be, Mr. Supervisor, you may have to start looking at where these calls are coming from, and is there a way to redirect some of them or to do something, because they're spending all day long.
Well,
I looked at the list. They're
I'm telling you right now,
all day long on the telephone.
there needs to be a study done or something done
that's
with
my
our
point, my point.
phone tree, because it sucks. I get phone calls from, and I could speak to everybody on this. I get phone calls 20, 30 times a day with no clue where they need to go. And it's just, something needs to be done with it. I'm not sure what. I know we don't probably want to hire a person and have a receptionist, because then you'd actually talk to a person. But it's very confusing. And people, when they hear supervisor for one, they just hit one a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. So you're number 9.
Right. Well, one of the things that we've seen over the years is because this township has always had a policy of being staffed, having our counter open. We do receive quite a few calls from the rest of the county, even outside the county, with former residents that have been here. They call us. I can get an answer from you. I can't get an answer from my township because they don't have a number that we can get a response from. 2 areas that have been dramatically reduced over the last couple of years. One, the ordinances, complaints from ordinances dramatically dropped from what we had. And with Mulch King here last year, I'm telling you what, it had a dramatic impact on the number of burning complaints that we would receive in the assessing department. So kudos to Clean Air. But we do have a lot of calls, and we try to answer them the best we can. Some of them are very quite challenging, and we have numerous calls to our attorneys from time to time because we do need clarification.
Well, my only point, Mr. Supervisor, I looked at her list, and it's extensive every day. Not only calls coming in, but then calls going out. And so at the end of the day, I didn't do any statistical measures, but 60% of a person's time appears to be on the telephone. And that means you only have 40% of your time to do the work that you're supposed to be doing. And I recall your 2 meetings ago when you gave us a presentation that said I might not be able to get the roll done. That gave me some heartburn really bad, because we clearly don't want the state to come.
He'll get it done.
We'll get the roll done.
Stretch the imagination.
We'll get
So
the roll.
He'll get it done.
We'll get there.
my point is,
Better.
probably some sort of study might be appropriate to figure out where they're coming from, where they're going, and if there's some way to do it. I don't know if there is or not. Thank you.
One more comment. Well, I don't know who you're getting these calls from, but we pay, as you know, a lot of money to BSNA to have this on our website or on the BSNA website. So if you're taking any calls from real estate people, I would say you direct them to the BSNA website. They're trying to get by having to pay the $2 or whatever they have to pay.
You don't have to
And
pay a fee in Bedford.
I thought real estate people do.
No.
Not
Well,
Bedford.
then even more reason, nothing against real estate people, but instead of tying up the time of our staff, they should be going online, and the public can too.
That's a very good point. Over the years, that has been dramatically reduced going through BSNA. Primarily, the calls we get now are concerns of things that have changed dramatically on the parcel that we're unaware of. We've had quite a bit of that lately. And there is definitely a group of individuals that are getting ready and preparing to move. They like to have that record card correct when they put that property up for sale, even though it may not have been for a number of years.
Well, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Matlow? We appreciate you being here. We'll see you in the next meeting,
Two
and
weeks.
we'll be prepared to hear you, so.
I don't think we'll have a meeting in 2 weeks.
Well, the next
After
next
the
scheduled
election.
meeting.
After the election, thank
Yeah.
you, because I would have probably been the only one here.
Yeah.
Wondered what I missed.
No, you would have all the voters here, they'd all be here.
Thank you very much, and we'll
Thank
see
you,
you.
Ron.
see
We
you
really
soon.
appreciate you being here to update us. Okay, 7E, update our request for a fee waiver from planning and zoning for the Blizzard Fest. Jewel Patton, if you'd like to come on up. Jewel has served on this committee since January. And she's here to update us.
Okay, is everybody familiar with Blizzard Fest? Because if not, I have these little flyers that I can pass out for you to look at.
I got one of those, thank you.
Okay. We started working, like Paul said, in January, and it's coming along really nicely. I've submitted all the paperwork to the Planning and the Zoning Committee. We're starting to get our sponsors. We have the location for the event, which is St. Paul's Church on Lewis Avenue. We're going to have...
Jewel, can you pull that mic down a little bit, please? Thank you.
Is that good? Okay, we're going to have, at this event, it's all free. There'll be a Santa, an ice skating rink, a live nativity scene from Indian Creek Zoo, a horse and buggy rides from Duke's Farms, Christmas movies inside the church, crafts for the children, Dickens carolers that will walk around at the event. Also, this high school choir will be there to sing. Madison Davis is Mrs. Monroe from here in Bedford. She will be there to help the kids with the crafts. We're serving free hot chocolate. MBT is providing popcorn. Tim Hortons are providing donuts. And we're working with someone right now to get hot dogs. It's all free.
Oh, great.
Everything is free. So we have our title sponsor. Can I say the name of the sponsor? Barron Insurance is our title sponsor. We have, at this point, we just have a couple of silver sponsors, Dr. Deborah Reiner and Jason Shepard. We have 2 bronze sponsors, Belinda's Child Care and Preschool and Greg Moore. And then we have a Christmas patron sponsor. We have some other
Well,
pledges.
don't forget about my sponsor.
What? I didn't know if I was supposed to say you.
No, but also you guys have the Bureau that's partnering too from Monroe County.
Okay,
And they're going to help with all the advertising and everything like that. So
right.
it's kind of like a partnership, though. So really cool there. Monroe County Convention and Tourism Bureau.
Right. We have pledges for other sponsors. I'm only telling you what I have in my hands. So, right now, we're at like a little over 6,000 that we have in our hands. We need 11,000 for just this ice rink alone. So, but we have them booked for at least one day. We can do that with the money we have now, that we have in hand. So we have them booked for Saturday, but really want to get them here for Friday as well. So if anybody up there would like to be our sponsor, we would love it. We have levels starting at $250.
So, you know, where I think it's prudent that they ask for a waiver fee is this is free. They are in partnership with Monroe County Community Foundation to where they are, so that makes them, you know, the nonprofit status. So this is a free event to the community. They're not charging anything for anybody to get in. So that's why I told them you should ask for waiver fees for this, because it is free. And it's a cool event for the township to have in our community. And why would we charge them to hold a free event for our community? So I think it's very appropriate for us to waive the fees.
We aren't charging for anything, not food, nothing. There's also a light contest that we're doing before this. It starts at Thanksgiving and runs through the 15th. The businesses, individual homes, and a neighborhood. So then we have 3 judges that will go around and judge. Not that you get anything tremendous, but you get a sign in your front yard that says you were the winner.
Those aren't political judges, are they?
No, they are not.
Oh, good.
It's all right, the election will be over anyway.
There's always another election for
Okay.
politicians.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms.
I think it's a
Patton?
good idea.
Mr. Frederick?
Well, it starts out, we are a nonprofit organization. And then, is this the Bedford Holiday Committee that's a nonprofit organization? Have you filed any documents that say you are a nonprofit organization? You filed a 501c3? Have you filed anything with the state?
We have.
You have? Okay, that's a question. Now, who is actually applying for this? Is this the Monroe Community Foundation, or is this committee? I see you're on it again, Paul.
The committee.
Is that
Yeah, I'm
your-
on the committee.
Yeah, you're on it as what? Individual?
Individual.
Okay. I brought this up once before. I never know if you're there as a township supervisor or if you're there as an individual, and you can be that. Just, it really ought to make sure. So
I don't think it matters what I'm there as,
well,
to be quite honest with you.
somebody
we can
gets
go
hurt,
on.
somebody gets hurt, it will.
It has nothing to do with the township. The township's not insuring, it's not on township property.
I talked about this last time, and you
I
said
know,
this
you
is an
talked about it.
individual, and that's fine. So I just want to know who's applying. So this is the Bedford Holiday Committee that is applying,
Correct.
and you have filed documentation somewhere that this committee is a nonprofit
I
organization.
think the point was we started to file, and then we stopped because we are with the Monroe Community Foundation,
Which is where our 501c3
which is where it's held.
through.
You don't have to do it on your own if you're part of them.
That's my question.
That's the answer.
So it's the Monroe Community Foundation that is the nonprofit?
Yes, they hold it all. We are part of them. They're doing all the filing, all the paperwork. They take in all the checks. They do taxes. They cut us checks when we need money, so we don't need to have our own. And that's, we've looked at a lot of different options, but they are the community foundation, so that's who we're with. So that's who we're under. So we don't need, right? We don't need to do our own thing.
I think you've entered into, or the organization has entered into a fund agreement with the Monroe Community Foundation. Is that accurate? And so therefore donations flowing through the Community Foundation would qualify as, if people wanted to donate.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that was my understanding in reading the documentation, that you are part of the Monroe Community Foundation. Thus,
They accepted us in.
thus the tax status.
That's what I wanted to understand. Is this a pass-through, or is this a, I mean, if it's a pass-through fund,
Pass-through fund, as I understand it.
I'm not going to opine as to whether or not it's deductible or not. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Any more questions?
What happens to the net profits if it's handled that way? That makes it tax exempt? I don't know.
Goes to Community Foundation.
The Community Foundation, if they don't do it next year and they have funds left over, they put it to a like fund, like a Ida Christmas Parade or something, like they could give the funds to that.
Right. We had that put in there, that it goes to whatever nonprofit thing that we want it to go to.
Part of the community fund, so they control the dollar.
Yeah, they put it in their general fund.
Yeah, yes, that would be what
Ms.
would
Tennevery?
happen.
It sounds good to me. I like the idea that there are volunteers in our community that are working together to establish entertainment and things to draw people to Bedford to have fun and in many different ways. And I agree that we shouldn't be charging planning and zoning fees to our own residents when they're only trying to benefit the community. So I'd like to move that we waive the fees from planning and zoning for 2018 Blizzard Fest in light of the fact that they are funded under the Monroe County Community Foundation, which is their nonprofit status.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion, Ms. Hershberger?
I just have a question for Phil. Shouldn't the applicant be then the community foundation, since they actually hold the 501c3?
Technically, yes, because they're, they have a fund agreement, so technically, yes, they should be the applicant. I mean, technically, the community foundation is the applicant, but when it comes to presentation at planning and the Board of Zoning Appeals, they can appoint the committee as their representative and come in and present on behalf of the community fund. And that's likely what will happen.
If we waive the fees, they won't have to be there.
The community fund,
That's,
or the
if we
community
waive the
foundation.
fees, if we waive the fees, then this organization doesn't have to show up at planning. Neither does the community foundation.
They should.
Yes, they do.
They don't have to show up at the BZA either. because we're
Yes, they
waiving
do.
the
They
fee.
still have to get approval. They're just getting the fees waived.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to come and make their presentation to, the way the ordinance reads now
That's
is
my
that,
problem.
is that they will have to come to both of those entities, the Board of Zoning Appeals, which will give the ultimate approval under the current
That's right.
ordinance.
That's the use
But
and
they
the
get a recommendation, they have to get a recommendation from planning that would be incorporated into the approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So they'll be there to present. They just won't have to pay the fee to do so.
And it sounds like they're going through that process.
Yeah.
Already, so I mean, it's not like they're trying to get out from under any kind of regulations.
All
They're
that
just-
paperwork has been submitted already.
Yeah, so. We'll have to
Mr.
go to the
Francis?
meeting.
I'd like to call a
Right.
question.
Can I just add a friendly amendment?
Sure.
That we make the applicant the community foundation, that way we're not opening a can of worms later that we,
I think that's fine, because
Waive
based
fee.
on the letter in our packet, they're already endorsing it, so I think it's fine. That's fine. I agree.
Can I add one other suggested amendment?
No.
As I mentioned before, unless there's a timing constraint issue, I would like this to be at the zoning and planning meetings where we have other items on the agenda, because there will be fees being paid by those. So if it allows, I would like to make sure that we have it when there's other things on the agenda. But if we get to the last meeting and there's nothing there, we still have to bring them in and.
It's already
Go ahead,
scheduled. I mean, they're already on the schedule for the next two. So I'm not sure. I'm sure there's other stuff coming up.
BZA is tough at the end of the year, it's hard to tell, so.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you
Thank you.
for everything. Item 8, new business. A, request for approval of vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $51,284.76. Fire District, $26,157.78. Police Fund, $546.94. Park Fund, $8,812.80. Metro Act Fund, $1,300. Library Fund, $891.35. Water Revenue Fund, $708.22. Downtown Development Authority, $1,718.22. Sewer O&M Fund, $14,011.16. Trust and Agency, $719 for a grand total of $106,150.23.
Support.
Okay, motion supported, discussion. Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, request for conceptual preliminary approval for Brookwood Villas North Planned Unit Development. The rep, come on up. Thanks for being here. Mr. Fredericks, you want to take this one?
Yes. The Planning Commission spent quite a bit of time with the petitioner, and you have a lot of that information in your folder. The comments essentially from the neighbors who you have seen their comments. You have seen the comments of the various and sundry agencies who are responsible for reviewing the preliminary PUD. We were told by the planning commissioners that they were prepared to approve the conceptual preliminary approval, and so I have a motion. Upon recommendation of the Planning Commission, I move the conceptual preliminary planned unit development for Brookwood Villas North be approved for parcels 5802, 022, 06513, 5802, 022, 05300, and 5802, 022, 052 located on Jackman Road between Dean and Temperance Roads, contingent upon satisfaction of all issues noted in the letters from the Monroe County Drain Commission dated 9/13/18, Monroe County Road Commission dated 8/14/18, Manick and Smith Group dated 9/20/18, and Bedford Township Fire Department dated 8/18/18. All flood zone and MDEQ requirements are satisfied. Preparation and submission to Council for approval of all necessary condominium documents. Preparation of a special assessment district between the township and the developer for street lighting in the development. Submission and approval of a landscaping and buffering plan for the development. Formation of a condominium association for the development. And relaxation of the 100-foot perimeter setback requirement subject to minor changes.
Second.
Motion supported, discussion. I just would like to say that the fire department expressed some about the house that is being torn down on Jackman. Will there be a house that's being torn down?
There eventually there'll be two of them, yeah.
Okay, they would like to talk to you about that for possible training.
Oh,
when
okay.
you utilize that, so.
Did you find out whether or not this is an oak openings preserve issue?
I looked everywhere and I could not find
Okay, I'm just
where
asking
it
the
was.
question because across the street behind the library, that is all oak openings.
Most of Bedford Township is.
Yeah, well,
part
that's
of
what I'm
oak
going to say.
openings.
And I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Yeah.
So that you don't run into somebody standing in the middle of the street.
Yeah, no, I did after the last meeting, you brought that up. I did some research. I couldn't find any maps
That's fine.
that showed
I'm
that it
just
was.
asking
Yeah.
if you checked.
Yep, I did.
And also, as I indicated at the meeting, be very careful about your construction entrance off of Jackman Road.
Yes.
You're going to have buses all over there. You're going to have people going in and out of the library. And of course, the citizens are not going to be happy with a lot of dust, dirt, crap, and corruption. So be really careful with your 1,000-foot construction drive as you're building it in there. Thank you.
We will, yeah.
Okay, any more discussion? I
Dust,
don't know about
dirt,
the
crap.
corruption part of it. but-
That wasn't aimed at me, I hope.
That's a new one.
Sorry.
I'm gonna steal that.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8D, request to approve the resolution exempting Bedford Township and its employees and officials from the
Why don't you
requirement.
back up to 8C?
C.
Oh, did I miss one there? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
8C, request for a rezoning from PBO Professional and Business to a C3 General Business for parcel number 5802-102-026-10, 6560 Lewis Avenue, the southeast corner of Lewis and Smith. You guys like, come on up. We've been waiting all night and I skipped you.
Mr. Supervisor.
It was.
It was. Find a different time and location to talk about that. Good evening. I'm here on behalf of JAP and specifically my client, Ali Parsapor, and his wife, Justine. I'm sure you've all seen the packet. I know Mr. Frederick's gone through it at planning. We had a pretty lively discussion that night because we were part of a second request that really didn't have the same implications as ours. I trust everybody on this board's having an opportunity to review both our original application, I think it was back September 10th or August 10th perhaps, and then our supplemental response to the Mannequin Smith report that came out. I guess this would be easiest to say I'd like to field some questions. We went into some great detail elaborating on the compatibility with the surrounding land uses in the area, all the permitted uses in the proposed district, and the conformity with the master plan. We received unanimous approval from both planning at the local level and the county level, or actually I didn't even look at the vote count at the county level, but I know it was recommended for approval there. So I would be happy to open up the floor to any questions you may have, or else I can go into a real long and detailed spiel that's going to rehash the information that's sitting in front of you. But I know everybody's been here for quite some time this evening. I have no intention on doing that.
That's right, the meter's running.
Questions for Mr. Breskel or his client? Ms. Tinneberry?
I don't have any questions. His material was thoroughly extensive and explained everything. I have a question for our Planning Commission representative, though. As I read through the minutes of the Planning Commission, I saw no support of the C3 zoning, but more support for C2, and yet then the motion is to recommend approval. So it was kind of confusing to me without having minutes that show support for C3. And then what led you then to decide that C3 was good on that corner?
Well, the conversation during the Planning Commission meeting was principally, why not C1? And that's what our planners were talking about. Then in the end, it was recognized, and several of the planning commissioners discussed it at length, that many of the C3 uses, either uses permitted by the ordinance or even those with special approval, because of the proximity of the school and the church, probably would not be permitted. Further, C2 could not be used because it's a parcel not large enough. So, and further, a building that was already there, there's no new construction, it's a building that's already there. So the building itself limits the potential for C3 uses. So you wouldn't turn that into a gas station probably. So the net result was the discussion that C3 with several other parcels that are going to be coming before us. C3 will be essentially the zoning of Lewis Avenue from the state line, probably halfway up Lewis Avenue between Smith and Temperance, or Smith and Secor. Well, I can't even get the right road. Stearns.
Stearns, maybe?
Stearns, hello. There's a considerable amount of C3 and C2 that is already in that direction. So it'll be a competition for the first one who gets a C3 use. But I think I've answered your question. There was a lot of discussion on it.
Well, that wasn't in the
It's
minutes.
interesting, our planner said, they said, recommend that you deny it.
I tend to agree with the planner, actually. I don't know where you see all that C3. C3, all you have to do is tear the building down and put up
They can do that.
something. That C3 is the strongest, allows the most invasive, if you ask me.
What would be invasive
type
there?
of a strip club.
You can't put a strip
It's
club
not
there.
permissible.
You can't put a porn, you can't do any of that there because of the school and
Right.
that. You can't put a gas station up. I'm just saying.
You can't do that with a liquor permit, or it's not, I mean, there's too many opportunities to tear down the building and put up something that I determine as offensive by a school and a church and a senior citizen housing. That's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying-
Just because there's a building there doesn't mean that
But I'm
the
saying, though,
building's
you
going to stay
can't
there.
put those things
You
there.
can put something else that is a gas station.
You can't put a gas station there.
Yes, you could.
Well, then why not make it C1?
Yes, you could. Yes, you could. You could put a gas station there.
I didn't think you had, I think you had to be so far away from schools and that because of the gas station.
No.
From what I
Gas station could go in there. We even talked about that as part of it. It's not in the minutes, but we talked about that. And
Well, I got
the
some bad information then.
discussion essentially was, if he's going to buy that building and then tear it down and put in a gas station, that business model doesn't work.
He may not, he might sell it.
I understand that. I accept
Hold on,
that.
let's talk to the applicant. What's your intentions for the building,
No,
sir?
you cannot
can't
rezone
hold it to
based
the
on
intention.
someone's intentions.
Okay.
Am I wrong, Phil?
No, you can't hold it
No,
down.
if you rezone,
That's it.
all allowable uses in that resulting zoning district are fair game, subject to the zoning ordinance restrictions, regulations.
Right, so it
So
doesn't
that's-
matter what he's intending.
Okay, so what would be offensive is what I'm asking.
Oh,
That could go there.
We didn't get to that discussion.
Well, I'm asking.
The church
for it.
was there. The
She's saying
church
offensive
people were
things.
there.
If I could interject just for a second, a lot of our conversation at planning did center around the fact that we were discussing, because we had the existing church and school right there, the ordinances already in place prohibit many of the most offensive possible uses of the property at C3, and a lot of the other offensive seeming uses, to whomever may perceive them to be offensive, would be regulated by a special use application. So there's already all these protections built into place, and that's what we focused our conversation on at planning. We talked more about the safeguards that are already in place, both by your ordinances, along with liquor controls regulations, that drastically eliminate any of the potential offensive uses according to our norms here in Bedford Township, including any of the types of uses that you originally described. We have a lot of those in place, and while it's clearly not relevant what the intention is, it is at least a conversation piece to talk about whether or not it's a financial viable opportunity or decision to do some of the things that we're concerned about. And I can tell you, we'll share that, no, it's not our intention to tear a building down or sell it and turn it into a vacant lot. That was never our intention. He wants to make it the most attractive, leasable building to bring in a Bedford partnership with a new occupant and have a good new tenant around.
C1 won't do that.
We're looking for the broadest possible approach we can get. And of course, C3 brings us that. And we like the fact that our neighbor is a church and our neighbor is a school, because it gives everybody a little bit of comfort and safety knowing that we're not going to be able to bring a bad neighbor into that location.
So we have a commercial marijuana opportunity on the ballot in November. You're saying that a marijuana facility selling commercial could not go in there?
I can't tell you that.
Marijuana.
No, I can't tell you that because it hasn't been approved.
A marijuana
There's too many
facility
assumptions that
cannot
need to
be
be made
placed
there.
in a commercial zone.
Excuse me?
A marijuana facility cannot be placed in a commercial zone as it sits today.
No, I'm talking about what's on the ballot.
And I would argue
well.
that that's still subject to site plan
I
approval in the
understand.
future, I
That's
think.
my point. That's
Well-
exactly my point. I don't want to take the chance.
Again, all I can
Nancy, let me
report-
tell you something. If
all I
this
can
passes
report to you-
marijuana, it's going to be a lot more than that corner.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that right now.
I'm dealing with that corner right now. So
Well, let's focus on the corner and not
Okay.
future ballot initiatives then.
I am focusing on the corner, what might happen in the future. Like I said, this gentleman may not always own it, somebody else may own it. I just don't see C3 on that corner, that's my opinion.
C3 across the street, C3 further down the road. There's C3 zoning up and down Lewis Avenue. The Planning Commission members looked at that extensively. As we said, or as I said earlier, many of the potential uses in C3 zoning will not be permitted simply because of its proximity to the church, its proximity to the school. Further, across the street is C3 zoned today. There are uses under C3 with special approval that more than likely would never be granted. I think the conclusion of the planning commissioners was that C3 zoning would be appropriate for that facility, for that parcel, because of the restraints that are in our ordinance today with respect to C3 zoning uses.
There are two C3 zonings in that area, not all up and down.
You can clearly disagree with them. That's
Anybody else
your
have any
duty.
questions for Mr. Breskel?
I did talk to Karen today about the C3 and it being so close, and she told me anything, because the parcel is so small, that even if we grant them C3, they won't be able to put anything more in there than they could in a C1. And then we called Laura to see what their rules were, and there won't be any kind of spirits, whether packaged or sold or whatever can be sold there because of the school church.
That's right.
Just to share
Do you
the
understand
information
that
that I got
correctly? I
from
mean, do you
Karen.
agree with the fact that you can get the same use out of C1 with the size of the parcel?
Well, I do agree that a lot of the uses overlap. I can't say that I completely agree that they're completely contiguous with one another and they're identical, no, without going item by item through the two ordinances and looking at the uses, no. I couldn't say that that's true. There is a lot of overlap there. And with the special use requirement for a lot of the C3 uses and with the proximity to the church, I do acknowledge that there are limitations that we're faced with. I still think it makes it a more desirable location as zoned as C3 than it would as 1, and that's why we're asking for it. However, I would really focus on the fact that I think there's a lot of adequate safeguards in place to prevent any of the less agreeable uses that we're all worried about. And I would acknowledge that the use across the street at the southwest corner that's already C3 it does abut up against residential property, which is a dynamic that we don't possess. We're not neighbors to a residence where
So if it
we're
was,
asking
if
for.
it was a restaurant, you couldn't serve alcohol there.
Correct. And even if we could, we'd need liquor control approval, or you guys would be left with the opportunity after the next census to approve us. So there's an approval process for everything. That's an additional layer of safeguards.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions?
Well, I will also tell you that the northwest corner of Smith and Lewis Avenue, there's a request in for C3 zoning for that parcel too. So that will be coming to the board. So essentially 3 of the 4 corners will be C3.
Really? We haven't voted on it yet.
Oh, no, I'm just saying.
Well, you
it's
just
coming
said
to-
3 of the 4
coming to it.
corners will be C3. That's as, if you get your way of rezoning everything.
well,
Okay, I look for a motion.
I have one. Upon recommendation of the Bedford Township Planning Commission and the Monroe County Planning Commission, I move the zoning on parcel 5802, 102, 026, 10, approximately 2.5 acres, located on the southeast corner of Lewis and Smith Roads, known as 6560 Lewis Avenue, be rezoned from PBO, Professional and Business Office District, to C3, General Business Zoning District, for the following reasons. A, the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map designates this area of the township to be commercial. The Bedford Township Master Plan designates the parcel to be a mixed-use area of the township, thus C3 uses are appropriate for this parcel. That any C3 use on the parcel shall be properly screened from the adjacent church and school in accordance with township ordinances. That any C3 use on the parcel shall not be a nuisance to the adjacent church and school. The petitioner understands that certain C3 special approval uses will not be permitted on the parcel. The C3 zoning district is consistent with the overall plan that Lewis Avenue in this area is believed to be a commercial corridor in Bedford Township. The rezoning is consistent with commercial zoning in the area. That's my motion.
I'll support.
Motion is supported. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
No, based on the fact that our planner recommended denial.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 6-1. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, item 8D, request to approve the resolution exempting Bedford Township and its employees and officials from the requirements of Public Act 152 of 2011 for the calendar year 2019. Mr. Francis?
You have a motion, we've adopted this.
I'm sorry, I missed
Pardon
Hirschberger.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Duh.
No problem.
This is the healthcare premium rebate that we've been working on to move everyone to that 20% mark. So this is the next year. You can see that the cost will be moving closer to the 80% mark. The full-time and management will already be up at the 20% mark, and then the rest will move up in the coming years like this, well, the previous township board had asked to do.
Okay, is that in form of a motion?
Make a motion to approve the resolution exempting Bedford Township government from the requirements of Public Act 152 of 2011 for the calendar year of 2019.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion?
Yes, I have one thing. I've said this before, I'll say it again. This really is an unfair item for Bedford. And the reason I say that is, if we were to have 50 people in our health plan, we'd be under different rules. It wouldn't cost us as much. Because if they're over 50 employees, then they base it on everyone's the same regardless of age. If it's less than that, they age rate it, and we pay a lot more because age rated. Now, to me, that's unfair, but we're stuck with that. So I think we need to still do this and work toward that 20% that's required.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8E, request for action on 2 properties to be deeded back to Bedford Township, parcel number 5802-033-055-00, Taylor Avenue, and number 5802-101-039-00, Lavoy.
I put this memo together, and then I was finally able to get a hold of Tim at the Monroe County Drain Commission to ask him about the parcel on Lavoy Road. He stated that that land is not, it's a wet land, it's not buildable, it's always flooded, so he would suggest we not take that. I wasn't sure, I was waiting to get a hold of him. The other one is an old railroad track that originally, I know the person that originally purchased this, and they bought the whole parcel because it ran behind the parcels they did own. This portion did not, so we never did anything with it. He is now passed, and so the family just let it go. Again, it's not surveyed, so the township would have to pay to have it surveyed before we could sell it or give it to these other parcels where they could probably do it on their own.
I have a few questions about now the flood, where I looked at it, only looks like it runs through the middle of it, and the back portion, the southern portion, isn't in the flood zone?
Well, the way Tim said it, that this whole back end ends up underwater.
See, but.
And he said it's
But
no
it's not
good
all
for
part of the flood
building,
zone, though.
no.
See,
not
the
whole
flood zone
thing.
only goes through about the center of it, so my
But-
thought would be, I mean, we're looking at some of the, the park board's looking at selling some of the pocket parks, the ones located, and doesn't it kind of hurt us when we sell parks? We could even designate, I mean, I don't think we want to designate it as a park, but, I mean, I just would like to see, can you put a driveway across the floodplain, Phil?
You have to have a crossing permit, and you have to go through a pretty labor-intensive and extensive process with MDEQ to get permission for a crossing permit if it's a regulated wetland.
Okay, I mean, just to me, it has frontage. It's not all in the wetlands. It's 7 acres. I mean, you would think it's valuable to somebody, but it didn't go out for auction. Nobody bid on it, so I mean, that tells you something.
Tells you something.
You know,
I mean,
that
I don't
somebody
wanna-
would have bid something on it.
I guess, I don't want to see the township to take on a liability. If there is a use for it, or if it is a marketable piece of property, that's another issue. But think long and hard before you take on what could prove to be a liability.
Well, it has a lot of negatives to it, the tracks, the sewer water treatment plant. I mean, it's all, Mr. Frederick?
I wouldn't touch this thing with a pole unless you did a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 environmental study on it. You don't know what's leached here, there, or everywhere. In a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental study, even a Phase 1 is going to be expensive, probably cost you more than the cost of, or the value of the property. I'm not so worried about the Taylor piece of property, but this one, there's too many, there's industrial sites across here. You're talking about industrial sites all over the place. I don't know about this sand pit back here. My view essentially is that I don't think you want to get in the chain of title for environmental purposes if that's the only one that you would be looking at. That's my view. Thank you.
Even if it's a regulated wetland.
Oh, that's even worse.
No, I agree with Lamar. I mean, it's, you know, I just didn't want to see us, you know, I mean, even, you know, like with builders, you'd think it'd be valuable to them when they have to give up property for wetlands. They could trade it for this, you know, I mean, you'd think it'd be valuable to somebody, but, okay, so.
Well, I think, Trudy, if the township rejects, then it becomes part of the land bank for Monroe County, which our treasurer administers. So, you know, if there is a marketable use, it's still there. The title resides in the county, and it could be sold to the benefit of the land bank, which is a valuable entity within Monroe County.
Okay. Well, I look for a motion then?
Do we have to have a motion? It just says here that if we don't do anything on or before December 31st, that all property not previously sold by the foreclosing governmental unit under this section shall be transferred to the, oh,
Yeah, we have to reject
Okay.
it.
We have to
Sorry.
reject it.
okay. I move to reject both Lavoy and Taylor.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 8E, request, oh, I just did that one.
We did that.
Okay, item 8F, request to accept the quote from IT Right to replace the server switches. Ms. Hirschberger?
I tried to word it as best I could, and I asked IT Right. You can see that Randy Allen referred back to it, but pretty much in layman's terms, we have 192 ports for our computers in this building, but I only have, let's see, 56 ports available. And they only run on megabyte speed, not gigabyte speed. All our equipment should be running on gigabyte speed. So what I would like, what I'm asking the board is to approve these new switches, which would give us 96 ports. So at least I can get all the rooms in this building working, so if we need to hook a computer to them, I don't have to come running up here, switch, and try and figure out who's not using what port, so I can use that port for another computer. And our system will run a lot faster. I know a lot of people are saying how slow everything runs. Well, this is one of the reasons.
I support that motion.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion?
Where's the money coming from?
Technology fund that we have for
Technology
software.
fund? Okay, thank you.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye.
Was
Ms.
that a formal
Tinberry?
motion that you made, by the way? Did we want to
Okay, I
make it a
should make it a
formal
formal
motion?
motion that we accept the quote from IT Right for the Ericans Network 310 Series L2 Managed Gigabyte Switch, 2 of them at a price of $1,088
From the technology.
Support.
from the
Okay, motion is
technology firm.
supported. Discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8G, request Township Board authorization for Township Treasurer Paul Francis to transfer certificate of deposit investments from Morgan Stanley Smith Barney LLC to UBS Financial Service, Inc., effective immediately.
And the reason for that is Morgan Stanley has gotten out of the business of dealing with governments and nonprofits.
So what have
So
they
the-
done with their money?
Pardon me?
So what have they done with their money?
Well, they didn't affect our money at all. It's invested in CDs, which will transfer to wherever. And the investment advisor that we went with at Morgan Stanley is now associated with
Okay.
USB.
UBS?
Excuse me, UBS.
I don't know.
USB.
I'm just reading.
I had a computer on my mind. So that's the reason. It's not going to require anything other than me signing an approval and Trudy signing that the board made a decision tonight. That's all that's involved in this.
No penalties?
No penalty. No, nothing's going to be redeemed.
Okay, that's,
They'll just come due when they are scheduled to come due.
Ms. Tinnevery?
I'd like to move that we authorize the treasurer and the clerk to sign a transfer of the certificate of deposits from Morgan Stanley Smith Barney LLC to UBS Financial Services Incorporated, effective immediately.
Support.
Motion is supported. Discussion? I just want to say thank you, Ms. Tinnevery, for really moving the meeting along tonight.
I know,
I'm proud
certain
of you.
people need help.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Charles Mahoney. I live in Mohawk Trail subdivision, and I got a little complaint today. As you know, Paul, you just mentioned it, okay, about the pocket parks. I happen to live next to one of them. And you know that too, so does Lamar Frederick and a few other people in here. I got the surprise of my life today. I live in a Mohawk Trail. We just had our roads replaced in there, okay? Done a good job. All of a sudden, along come with I think it's the park board that done it, I really don't know, cut the grass in that field. At the same time, they put a for sale sign in front of it. The for sale sign is that park is up for sale right now. I have asked this board and I have asked the park board, how in the world can the park board own property? How can they own it? They don't pay taxes on it. Nobody else did either. That pocket park was put in there by the developer of that subdivision. It belonged to everybody, not just me or anybody else. And I have gone through time after time after time, okay, with Joe Kerlinchak, Mel Poslin, and told them, Pearl Albert Green, Lamar Frederick, and a few other people, if they ever decide to get rid of that park, I'd like to purchase it. I spent months and years of my time cleaning that damn place up when I first moved down here. And it left a bad taste in my mouth. And it still does. To see this happen again, I don't know what's going to happen. But I like to get some information, get some answers from somebody. How can the park board wind up with property and can sell it?
Go ahead, Phil.
The park board holds title to the property as opposed to it being in the deed restrictions as being owned by an undivided percentage by all of the owners, property owners within the subdivision. So the park board, and when we were asked by the park commission to determine ownership, we did have a title commitment provided to us, because we wanted to make sure, and we checked the deed restrictions, and we also checked the plat for Mohawk subdivisions, that part of the plat where this parcel is located. So it has been confirmed that the Park Commission owns the property. So the Park Commission has determined that this parcel and another parcel, which apparently isn't being used for park purposes.
Right, the Miller Park out on Substation and Crab Road.
Right.
I know the one you're talking about.
Right. Would be sold, and whatever proceeds would be generated from the sale would be used for other Park Commission purposes. So there's nothing that would prevent you from making an offer or bidding on the parcel.
Phil, I have made offers on that park.
Well, now's the time.
Well, no. Okay, I see a conspiracy going on because I have a complete plot map of Mohawk subdivision when McLaughlin put it out there. The reason he put that park there because it was unbuildable. Okay, it wasn't a park; it was a tot lot, is what it was. Myself and Arnie Beverly, who is dead now, put in a basketball court over at our own expense after we cleaned the place up for the kids to play in. There was a merry-go-round in there that a kid got his finger cut off, and they came to me and wanted to put it on my insurance, and his kid got hurt.
Mr. Mahoney, if that lot is unbuildable,
yes,
it's probably not going to sell.
Huh?
If the lot is unbuildable, it's probably not going to sell. But we've looked at the building department, and it is a buildable lot.
It is not a buildable lot.
Then it won't sell, because nobody's going to buy that lot that they can't build.
Well, I'm not worried about it.
Then you'll have a good opportunity to buy it. Because like he said, it's for sale now, and it is park property. If they just came to Chuck Mahoney and sold that park to Chuck Mahoney for X dollars, I mean, that's going to look pretty bad on the park board. So, I mean, you got to consider the situation that they're in.
I have offered the park board money for it, that they could put into other things in other parks. I talked to the deaf here, okay? And I'm done talking. I don't care what they put in there. They could put a dump in there for all I care. As long as they put a fence up between my property and them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Ken Gagne, 8311 Lambert Street. I wasn't quite sure if I could get up during the 2 minutes, and I kind of wished Andrew would have stayed. I have a letter here that it was in the paper, that Bedford Township residents got that Malt King facility free. I own 4 park properties in Bedford Township, and I'm upset that the board chose to pay the man for the rest of the year. You should have just, we'll go the rest of the year like the paper says, free. I also have a receipt here dated August 5th where I was charged $5 because I went in there with about 3-4 wheelbarrow loads of branches in my dump trailer. And I got charged $5 because I had a dump trailer. I thought about leaving with a load of mulch, but I will never be on that property again. I hope he spent the $5 wisely. I went out and asked him if he was going to stay, and he said no. And I told him I had a letter where Bedford Township residents got the use of that free. And I said I also have a receipt dated August 5th where I was charged. And I also have the other piece of card that they gave me the last time I went in there that said they were going to start charging October 1st. So I'm really discouraged that you chose to spend my township money on my 4 properties and give it to him. I hope DEC really comes down on him and that wood pile gets moved away from that waterway that's next to the road. And I just hope that there was a lot of other people would have stayed, but it just seems that the comment, our 5-minute comment, is too far down on the sheet because half the crowd leaves when they get their part of the business taken care of. And maybe some of you people could look at moving our 5 minutes up a little ways. Or if anything that is on the paper can be discussed during the 2 minutes. It was down under old business, so I wasn't quite sure if I could get up there during the 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Judy Hall, 9283 Valletta. Mulch King, thank you for providing us a place to put our leaves. And it is at a much lower cost than what it would cost us as township residents in taxes to put dumpsters out here for our leaves for this time.
Hey, ma'am, could you please
Hear that.
address the chair? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you taking less of our money and putting it into Mulch King rather than it costing more to put in dumpsters. Quite frankly, whatever kind of resolution that you want to come up with to provide us some leaves and yard waste disposal is wonderful, and I appreciate your willingness to do so. Another question, one thing I wanted to address was the fire department policy manual. I would like to ask, and just tell me if I'm out of line, do the firefighters themselves, will they have any input in this manual? Will they have any say, any bargaining power at all?
Go ahead, Mr. Francis.
Sounds like a contract to me.
It's not.
It's not, okay.
Go ahead, Lauren.
The fire chief worked with his staff to do a lot of the initial work on that manual. The fire chief has worked with others in the fire department itself. So there's been a group of 5 or 6 officers along with the fire chief who put all that together. So it's not just the chief by himself.
But also
My question is, will they have input? Not have they had input, but will the current firefighters have input on what is going to be decided that's on your agenda?
To my understanding, the leaders, the captains, they ask the people their thoughts and they communicate with them. Then they gather it back, they bring it to the group, and then they tell their findings. So it sounds like it's the whole fire department that has a say.
If you mean a strategic plan, the answer is yes.
Okay.
The going forward, that they've already talked about equipment, the order of the equipment, they've talked about the potential uses, where are they going to go in terms of, do we need another fire station, where would we put it if we did? So there's a lot of planning that's going on, and they all have input to that.
She's talking
That's
just
wonderful.
about the policy manual, though, and the
Well,
answer is to your question.
about the whole thing too, as well, Mr. Frederick, absolutely. I'm just glad that the workers are consulted, because they're the ones that do the work, and I think their input is valuable. The third thing I want to address very quickly is I urge you to proceed with extreme caution whenever you are deciding a rezoning issue. Businesses will do whatever they want once they get the zone that they want. I come from fighting Toledo City Council for 3 years on the general truck rezoning issue that was on Suter Avenue. And yes, there was a school right there. This business would generate over 550 trucks per day right in front of an elementary school. And you know what? It all got done because there was money involved. I'm not saying this board is like that, but I'm asking you that I just moved from a nightmare and I don't want to live in another one. Please proceed with extreme caution by giving huge leeway to companies. A professional business zone, I think, is very appropriate near a school, near a resident, and a church. That's how I feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments? Okay, seeing none, Comments from board members? Ms. Tinderberry?
I'm gonna pass.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
Turn that mic off.
Mr. Steiner? Mr. Clements?
I actually have something.
Okay.
For the board, I wanted to let you know I reached out and was able to finally successfully communicate with Chief Massengill. This is the first time he's been in that kind of situation, so I wanted to not only check and make sure that he and Lieutenant Tenney were good, but also because of their time away, also make sure their families were squared away, yards didn't need to be mowed, stuff like that. He wanted me to relay to you that it has been a very overwhelming situation. His exact words is he has not ever experienced that level of devastation, but wanted to make sure that you guys knew that he was appreciative of the opportunity, and they had also received a direct word from their chain to thank this board for allowing them to go down and to participate and to help those in need. That's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Frederick?
Pass.
Wow. Mr. Francis?
I have nothing tonight.
Well, I'm going to cut mine way short. I feel bad now.
No, you
Hey,
won't
move to
after I'm
adjourn.
done.
Thursberger?
I have stuff. Okay. A reminder, Halloween in Bedford Township is held on Wednesday, October 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. Please drive slow through subdivisions during this time. Kids don't watch out, they dot through those streets. The general election is Tuesday, November 6th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. If you still need an absentee ballot, please stop in my office or call us so we can get you the application and get you that ballot. The clerk's office will be open Saturday, November 3rd for ballots only from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Residents who are receiving multiple applications, those are from political parties, not from my office, even though they have my name on it and our address, they are not from me, so you do not have to send in duplicate applications. And then lastly, due to the election, this next board meeting for the Township Board will meet Tuesday, November 13th.
Well, I'll keep mine quick and just add to the Halloween, just a little idea for the youngsters that are going to start going out on their own. Just buy them a green glow wristband or something that reflects if they're, you know, something that they can be spotted easily. So, quick few things. Economic Development Committee, we had reviewed all the applications, which you had a lot of good applications, a lot of new applications. The BBA got involved and sent it out to all their members. So we got a lot of good ones, a lot of new faces. So we did go through with our group and kind of, we're going to have a recommendation of the group that we think that you should approve. It'll be at the next meeting. Downtown Temperance, they have started to do the survey work required, and Manica Smith's is supposed to meet with one of the other owners this week, so we're looking for that to continue to move. Just so everybody knows, the parking and the bike lanes, that is part of this TAP grant, so that will probably be done, I would say, next spring, early summer. So we've had a few calls of wondering when them are going to be done, so it is part of the grant. I just wanted to thank the people that serve on Bedford Watch Group. They're a great group of people. I've actually done a couple shifts with my son, but I had 8 people alone on my one shift from 12 to 2. So there's 8 cars driving around with a yellow light on top of their car, just kind of canvassing the neighborhoods. They're all on a walkie-talkie system, and all they do is report if they find something or if they see something. You know, I'm really impressed. So you got a lot of extra eyes and out there patrolling neighborhoods, and so it's a pretty cool deal they have. And I'm going to keep it short. That's all I got. Any more comments? We stand adjourned.